Welcome to the Single Father Podcast. I am your host, Kendall Donaker. This podcast is dedicated for anyone out there who's dealing with mental health and fatherhood. You'll hear about my struggles, my defeats, my victories, my highs, my lows, my triumphs, my tribulations, and everything in between. I like to call this a collection of journal entries into my struggle and adapting to single fatherhood. Without further ado, let's take a look inside my journal, the Single Father Podcast. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and otherwise. It is your host, Kendall, Father DZ, giving you a look inside my journal into fatherhood and mental health. Guys, I thought it might be nice to revisit and talk about my relationship with my parents. The recent episodes, I've been talking about relationships that I've had with my co-parent and other relationships when it comes to women and my love life. And I wanted to kind of take a little flashback on kind of where it all started for me. And I can tell you this, my earliest memory that I have is me as a kid is seeing my parents fighting in another room. And it really affected me for a couple different reasons. The main reason being, I think it's the first time that I've experienced trauma. You see, that memory that I'm thinking of, I remember me bursting into the room and my little hands just kind of attacking my dad as I knew that he was verbally berating my mother at the time. I said mother at the time like I switched mothers. No, I mean, just at that time, I remember feeling a sense of, I guess, defensiveness towards my mother and how I wanted to defend her and protect her. And as some of you know in past podcasts, my relationship with my father is a little bit complicated because at times I felt like he was just my friend and someone I can get along with and watch movies with. And then at other times I felt like he was the boogeyman, someone who constantly made me uncomfortable. And I really hated that about my childhood. But it wasn't just with him, it was also with my mother. I remember always feeling a little confused about my parents' relationship. My mother always seemed, I guess, careful, I would say. When I was younger, I remember my mom telling me that she was pregnant with twins. But I also remember her being really afraid to tell my dad. But it wasn't in like a cute way. It was like a genuine fear. And there's a couple different times that I felt that way. Another time was really kind of fucked up. I remember one moment where someone accidentally put a for sale sign in front of our house. And my mom saw that and got really devastated. She was really hurt and she started crying because she felt like my dad was sending a message like he was leaving her, right? And then she called him while he was at work and she asked him about it. And I remember while she was on the phone, he did not officially confirm whether, he was leaving her or not. In fact, I remember he kind of made her to believe that, in fact, he was leaving her. And it turns out that the whole thing was just a mistake. The real estate agent just put the sign in front of the wrong lawn. But yet my dad, he went along with it. I just remember feeling that it was just an evil thing to do. Um, and I remember my mother could be quite cruel in her own right, but she was always so, I'll get into more of that in a little bit, but I remember she would always be very manipulative or shady when it came to things with my dad. I remember she would try to hide things, or um, she would impersonate his voice on the phone a lot. I'm not really sure what the reasoning or the purpose was, but I do remember that she would do that quite often. And I remember just feeling a sense of distrust in our house. No one trusted each other. It felt like a house of tension. And I felt that way really my entire life. While I was growing up, my dad was really distant, but not distant like purposefully. It was more so like he was working a lot. He was a regional manager of a furniture company, and he would be gone a lot. I think I spoke about this in one of my earlier episodes, but I remember I couldn't fall asleep until I heard him come home. Like once I heard him enter the door, I still felt safe because there was a grown man there, right? Not to sound sexist, but it was like, hey, my dad's the protector. But I remember for a long time, I really didn't know him. I just kind of knew that he was there, and I felt safe. And I guess I'm not sure if I could say the same for my mother. It was right around the time when I was a freshman in high school. I could tell that the relationship was getting very, very bad. Again, I think it was a story I told before, but while in middle school, we lived in Nebraska, and I remember that we were making a move out to Las Vegas. My dad went ahead and um, flew out to Vegas and with a lot of his stuff ahead of time to, I guess, get the keys for the house and to kind of set up shop or whatever he needed to do. I just remember that he was there earlier. And I remember we were supposed to come out a week later after he went out. But probably the most cruel thing that I've ever experienced when it came to the protectiveness I had from my mom is he allowed my mother with 4 kids to pack up a U-Haul by herself and drive, I don't know whether it was 8 or 12 hours on her own with 4 kids from Nebraska to Las Vegas with virtually no help from him at all. And, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, I don't know everything that went behind that, but I remember my mom taking periodic breaks to try to sleep and cry. And I just remember feeling so bad for her and so angry towards my dad that he would allow his wife to 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 do that on her own. I'm sorry, Dad, if you're listening, but that's just the way I felt, and I can only be honest about my feelings. So I knew that that was kind of a really big line in the sand when it came to their relationship. But as time went on, and we moved out to Vegas and kind of set up shop. For the most part, I tried to just mind my own business and keep to myself and enjoy my new life in Vegas. I remember when they announced that they were getting a divorce, it was more of a problem that I didn't react. And I guess my mom came to me later and told me that my dad felt angry that I didn't react more. um, and I guess I don't know if I really had a reaction. I think part of me just felt like I wasn't surprised. Later, my mom ended up moving in with my dad's business partner. I remember the way she told me is, "Hey, we're moving into Jim's house." And again, To put in context that I didn't really know my dad that well at the time, just because he was always gone and working. I didn't really have an objection. I kind of just said, oh, okay. At the time, my mom was like my best friend. And, hey, if she said jump, I jumped. So I jumped. The next thing I know is we're all living at, Jim's house, my dad's ex-business partner, which is kind of crazy. And I think would be too long for me to kind of go in the details of that aspect specifically. But I do know that I felt a little uncomfortable, but I trusted my mother. So I trusted that this was the right decision for all of us. But I admit I did feel uncomfortable. More so because as I think a month or two went by and they were trying to work out custody arrangements, I kind of felt that even though that she had a big problem with my dad, I felt like he really didn't do anything to me personally. He's still been there since my earliest memory, since I was born. So I felt like your problem with him is your problem, but it doesn't have to be my problem. So I reached out to my dad and I asked if I could go over his house. He said, of course. But it didn't really go over well with my mother. And from that point on, well, let's just say it was the start of the end of my relationship with my mother. As I was growing up, I've always heard things about my mom, but I think I've always dismissed them or put in the back of my head because, well, that's my mom, right? I trust and I love my mother, and there's nothing that anyone could ever say to me that's going to make me think differently about my best friend, my mother. You know what I mean? Every notion that she could be cruel, manipulative, and narcissistic, those words at the time, I wouldn't even relate to my mother in any way, shape, or form. It was ridiculous. But as time went on, I would see that it wasn't as ridiculous as I once thought. When I brought up to my mom that I wanted to start going over my dad's house, I remember her just using manipulative words like, wow, if you want to do that to me, then I guess go ahead. Or I can't believe that you would put me through that. Or something like, do you know everything your dad's done? I haven't even told you the half of it. By the way, I should clarify that never in my life have I ever seen my dad hit my mother. Verbal abuse, absolutely. More times than I could possibly count. But physical abuse, I've never seen it. But anyways, she was really defensive and upset that I wanted to go over his house, but nonetheless I did. The second time I went over to his house, I remember there was the first time that I've ever seen change in my mom. She started to become the monster I now think she is today. And I know that's not polite, but like I said, I can only speak my truth. She would try to blackmail and manipulate me and force me into situations that I wasn't comfortable with. I remember she told me that I wasn't allowed to take my computer over my dad's house because she wasn't comfortable with that at the time. And now what that means, your guess is as good as mine. And at the time, it was kind of a really big deal. Not only am I a high school kid, but I was a lifeguard at the time and I really wanted a laptop. And that was the first thing I bought with my own money. I saved up enough to buy a really nice Mac laptop and I carried it with me everywhere. So the fact that I couldn't have it was ridiculous. The fact that she wouldn't let me bring it over to my dad's house because it made her uncomfortable made absolutely no sense. But I kind of just said fine and let it go. And went to his house to visit. And when I came back, she said, if you ever go over your dad's house again, I think you and me's relationship is going to change. I kind of just ignored her and brushed it off, but I didn't know how right she would be. Because the next time I went over my dad's house, my dad pulled me aside and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but your mom reached out to me. And I said, okay, what? And he told me that while you were here, your mom went through your computer and saw pictures of your girlfriend naked on your computer and is threatening to basically show them to her parents. Essentially, my mom was blackmailing me into um, discontinuing my relationship with my father. And I remember just being so angry and hurt and confused. This is my mother. How could she ever do this to me? In fact, I thought it was so ridiculous and so out of left field, bizarre that he was just strictly making it up. I got kind of mad at him. I called my mom to confirm this, and she said, well, you're not talking to me much lately, and I think your dad's a bad influence on you, and now you have these naked pictures on your computer. I just think that maybe you'd be better off at my house. And the more you spend with him, I think the more compelled I would be to kind of tell your girlfriend's parents what's been going on. And it was just clear, pure blackmail. But I think because I was so flabbergasted and hurt, to me, it was like someone telling you Jesus Christ is across the street, and on Halloween, Jesus hands out candy with razors in them. Like, you'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I know that's a bad example, but that was kind of how I felt with my mother. I felt like what she was doing and what she was saying to me is so out of left field that I, I think I just snapped. I cussed her out and I said, you and your boyfriend can go fuck themselves. I'm calling you out on your bluff. I don't think you'll ever do this. And I hung up. I go to sleep. That morning, I wake up to about 30 calls and texts from my girlfriend. The very last text I got from her is, I'm sorry, my parents won't let me talk to you anymore. We have to break up and I have to block your number. And you can guess what happened. My mom showed her those pictures, and why we had to break up and all that jazz was kind of crazy, but I remember it was a really, really big deal. I called her dad to try to explain the situation and basically just saying that my mom was blackmailing me, and his response was kind of like, look, dude, not only do you have naked pictures of my daughter on your computer, if what you're telling me is true about your mother, then I'd rather not have my daughter around your family right now anyway. I remember that was it for me. That was fucking it. I mean, that was it. I cussed her out. I cussed her boyfriend out. And really just drew a line in the sand there. And I remember not shortly after that, she started telling my siblings things about me that simply weren't true. And let me give you some back context. Remember I told you guys earlier that I would always hear things about my mom? Well, some of the things that I heard were, again, kind of out there. So my dad, he's not my biological dad. I mean, clearly I'm black and he's white, but he's my dad. He's been there since I was born. His name's on my birth certificate, but he's not my biological dad. But to be clear, he's no stepdad or anything like that. He's my dad. All right, everybody get it? Good. But my biological dad, I remember hearing things about him back in the day. Um, no more relevant than what my mom told me about him, which at one point she told me he died. He was in jail. He raped her. He was this. He was that. She told me a whole bunch of things. But I didn't care. No one really brought up his name much, and I didn't hear about him much, and I didn't care. But I remember hearing some rumblings back in the day, and people would tell me that the reason he's not in my life is because he wanted to break up with my mother. Even though that she was pregnant, he felt that she was kind of, I guess, crazy. He wanted to break up. My mom did not take that well. So what she did, she moved while still pregnant with me, moved to a different state without anything on paper. Whoever has the kid at the time can basically do whatever they want. And so long as that kid is in the mother's stomach, the dad really has no say on anything the mother does, to be honest with you. So when she moved, she really made sure that he would just never find me. I remember one time in my life, I think maybe when I was 10, my mom received a letter from him in the mail requesting to speak to me. My mom brought me the letter and asked me if I wanted a relationship with him and if I wanted to speak to him. If any of you have even remotely similar parents, I think you'll know what I mean by, even though she gave me a choice, I knew what the choice was. So I said no, and that was the end of it. I say that because when my parents got a divorce, my mom started making up a lot of things about my dad. One of them was that he beat her. One of them was that he raped her. One of them was that he touched one of my little siblings sexually. Basically that he was a monster and blah, blah, blah. When I was younger, I remember there was one time that I had to go to foster care. I was 17 at the time, and they were allowing me to basically get adopted by my Nana. My siblings were very much younger than me and had to go to a foster home where they said, if you want to go with your Nana, you can. At the time, my Nana was really disappointed in my mother. She thought that all these accusations against my dad were just fabrications out of her anger. She thought that if she wanted a divorce, she could have easily said, yes, he was terrible to me in our marriage and I had an affair with his business partner and that was that. But my Nana really resented the fact that she made all of these accusations. So my mom got really mad at her and made a very big case on me not getting adopted by my Nana, which is kind of unfair and wild because CPS gave me the choice to go to a foster home with my siblings or stay with my family member, my Nana. So I chose my Nana, and that always kind of haunted me because I felt like maybe I betrayed or let down my siblings and maybe I should have gone with them. But at the time, I just wanted to go with a family member. I felt like if I was out of CPS, if I was out of that system or whatever, then I had a better chance at helping them. So I ended up, despite what my mom tried to do, I ended up getting adopted by my Nana. And I think my siblings were in the foster care system for about maybe 2 months until CPS kind of figured out everything and my mom got to pick them back up. When I really drew a line in the sand with my mom, she started telling my siblings a lot of things about me, saying that I hit her, saying that I was this, saying that I was that, and I'm the spawn of the devil. You get the pattern? Every time my mom gets upset with people, she makes accusations up against them. Anytime she feels backed into a corner, she starts saying things and tries to manipulate people, and on and on and on it goes. I remember at the time feeling so devastated. Now, due to the um, serious accusations against my dad, my siblings weren't visiting my dad at the moment until, they kind of went to court and figured it all out. So while my parents were going through their custody battle, um, things got a little tense. Going back a little to the time that I was staying with my dad after my mom did the whole blackmail thing, my dad felt like he needed help and felt like he needed my help in the taking down my mother. Now, here's the thing. Did I feel like what my mom did was horrible and evil? Absolutely. But would I help my dad into taking my siblings away from my mother? Would I get involved in their court battle in any way, shape, or form at all? No. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be involved. Whatever their drama, whatever their nonsense was, I felt like it had nothing to do with me. But my parents felt differently. This podcast is sponsored by Keys AI. Guys, if you're single or struggling with dating, I think you're going to be very interested in what I have to say next. If you've ever used a dating app, you know that they're a huge pain. But what if I told you that there was a virtual wingman that worked on every dating app? That's exactly what the guys over at Keys AI have built. Keys AI is your virtual wingman that suggests exactly what to say to land your next match. I've used Keys AI on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, and let me tell you, it is an absolute game changer. I won't even use dating apps without it now. If you want to start getting more dates immediately, then download Keys AI for free at thekeys.ai or search Keys AI in the App Store. Guys, what are you waiting for? Download this app today. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, with everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has the tools to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. My dad pulled me aside one day and kind of like a mafioso boss told me, "Hey, look, either way, it's going down. I'm taking those kids. I could do it with you or without you. But either way, it's going." And I felt so angry because he really said it in such a smug way, like a matter of fact. And look, I hated my mom at the time, but I would never do that. But he wanted my help, right? He wanted me to testify in court about things that speculations and just about things that I wasn't comfortable with and things I just really wanted no part of. And I refused. And we got in a big argument on Christmas, actually, believe it or not. We got in a big fist fight. Cops came and told us, no charges were going to be filed, but said it was best if I went and lived with my mother. Now, in my head, me and her, after what she did to me, if I go back to her now, I think I'll be in a living nightmare of a hell. I was afraid. I begged and begged and begged the cops, "Please don't take me to my mom. Please." I said, "Well, son, we have no choice." Again, like a mafia boss, the cops took me aside and said, "Either way, look, son, you're going." So they took me to my mom's house. My mom opened the door with the most nicest, warming presence you could ever experience. But everyone who has a mom You know what I'm talking about. They're nice on the phone, they're nice to other people, but once that door closes, you know you're in for it. At this point, I haven't seen my mom, I think, in about maybe 2 months, 3 months. She opens the door, greets the cops, says how awful it was, and says that she'll take good care of me. When she closed the door, the first thing she says to me, "How did that work out? Now we play by my rules." I mean, the way she said it sounded straight out of a movie. Like, who says that? I remember being so afraid. Her boyfriend, Jim, I remember him standing there, kind of observing and monitoring what we were saying, just in the background. I felt like I felt like it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where he's like the grand wizard behind the curtain, just kind of controlling everything. That's kind of what I saw him as. But my mom was talking to me and made me feel so uncomfortable. She said, "There's your room. You can go in there. Um, Keep the door open." She's like, "Anytime you make a call, I want to listen to it from now on." I mean, it was very uncomfortable. When I say the time that I spent there was a living nightmare and a hell, it really was. It's probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been in my entire life. Each day was just a mind game and a manipulation push with my mom. It was terrible and frightening. I felt so scared, but mostly scared because I didn't recognize the woman that was in front of me claiming to be my mother. She was completely someone different from the best friend that I once knew. I knew that now she was capable of anything, and I don't know what that meant for me. I remember one night I called a lawyer, and I asked if he could help me with emancipation. And I remember um, being so afraid. I was whispering the entire time. I'm like, "Please, can you help me? I need to get emancipated somehow, and I need to take my siblings away from my mom. They need to be kept safe, you know." And I remember her hearing that and taking my phone and throwing it across the room. And um, she made me sleep outside for a day. Um, she told me to go sleep in the yard. She threw a blanket out there, and I slept in the grass that night. It was the worst time of my life. I remember one day, and I'm not sure if I spoke about this in an earlier podcast, but I remember one day she calls me up to her room. She asked me a question about my dad. She said, "And that's why, you're this and this, and remember when your dad did that?" And I shook my head, yes. It was something crazy stupid. It was like a stupid thing she asked me. She was like, "Remember when your dad did that?" And I shook my head, yes. And she's like, "Answer me." And I said, "Mm-hmm." And then she said, "What does that mean? I need you to tell me, yes, do you remember?" I'm thinking, like, something's off here. She's acting weird. She asked me a weird ass question. I answered her twice, but she needs me to verbally tell her yes. It was weird. I look around the room, and in between me and my mother was a nightstand, her bed, and then her on the other side. On the nightstand was her phone. I thought, there's no way my mom, no. Not 1 inch of a step did I take until my mom leaped over the bed, jumped on her bed, threw herself at her phone. We wrestled for about 2 seconds, but I didn't need to wrestle her phone. Like, I knew what I've already suspected. She was recording me. She wanted to record me if she couldn't get my consent to testify. And yeah, both of them were asking me to testify at the time. They wanted me to say things against the other. My policy was no. But if she couldn't get my consent, she was going to force it out of me, recording me. She was recording me. I felt disgusted and betrayed by it. It was terrible. I called my Nana and I tell her what happened. And I remember my mom leaving the house quickly and going, she left. She just got in her car and left somewhere. I felt suspicious and scared. I told my Nana I'm on the phone with her, right? I'm like, she was recording me. She was acting weird. She's acting sporadic. And she just left the house in a hurry. I don't know what's going on. I'm afraid, right? I don't know what she's going to do next. At this point, I'm thinking maybe this woman could come back with a gun and shoot me and I wouldn't be surprised. She comes back and she has a brace on her hand. She comes back. It was kind of silly. It just, belief-wise. She comes back, she walks in the house with a brace on her hand. She comes in with a CVS bag and a soda in the bag as well. She went to CVS, got a brace, and then proceeded to tell everyone that I broke her hand trying to wrestle for the phone. After that, I remember thinking, my God, this woman either wants to see me in jail or see me dead. If I'm not following her, I am truly against her, son or not. Oh my God, it was so crazy. And she told all my siblings that as well. I'm living there and they're already thinking that I'm the spawn of the devil, right? I remember trying to be alone, having a lone moment with my siblings, and my mom wouldn't allow that either. My siblings at the time were really young. I felt like we're easily influenced. I wanted to protect them so bad, but at this point it was pretty much a lost cause. Every move I made in that house was monitored by my mom and her boyfriend. I could not do anything. I could not have a private moment to myself. Nothing. I was basically a prisoner. Sorry, it's kind of hard for me to talk about sometimes, just remembering that trauma. A lot of time after that is kind of hard for me to remember. My Nana eventually did adopt me. I wasn't talking at that point to either one of my parents. My dad, we just had a fist fight, and I felt like even though I got to know him those last couple months of living with him, I felt like every time you try to reel me in with kindness, you just remind me that you're the boogeyman. You get so angry and you let everyone know it. His anger issues and how he treats women. I mean, I loved my dad, but to me, it just reminds me of a story my Nana recently just told me, actually. And it's that a woman sees a snake drowning in the water. She picks up the snake and brings it into her home, feeding it, taking care of it, bathing it, cleaning it, giving it a comfortable place to stay. And then after all of that, the snake bites her with a poisonous venom. She looks at the snake while she's dying and says, "Why? Why did you do this to me after everything I've done for you?" The snake looks at her and says, "You knew exactly what I was when you took me into your house." And with my mom, it was kind of like my best friend turned into my worst enemy. And I had really no interest in having a relationship with her again. She ruined my family. I remember when they went to court, the judge did see that my mom was lying about a lot of things, but felt that both of them were at fault for a lot of things as well. They ended up getting 50-50 custody. But my mom influenced my siblings during that time so much that every time that it was my dad's turn to have my siblings, they didn't want to go. They were just as afraid as I was at her house. They didn't want to go with my dad. He was confused, and me hearing about it, I was confused. I couldn't believe that they didn't want to go. This man that's been in their life their entire time. My mom was able to manipulate them enough into believing that he actually was this monster and did all these things. Studying psychology in college, you learn about this story about how a mother manipulated a child into believing that her father touched her inappropriately. Now, you may wonder how, but it's really easy to manipulate a young child into believing even a lie. And eventually, if you tell that lie long enough, you know the old saying that it kind of becomes the truth. And what I mean by that is you slowly plant ideas in their heads. Because when you remember something, you don't remember the exact moment. You just remember the last time you remember it, if that makes sense. So you can say, remember when your dad was giving you a bath and he touched you inappropriately? Well, no, I don't remember that. It was just a bath. Well, no, it wasn't. Remember when he did that? Remember? Remember when he did this? And then you say it over and over again until as you get older, you start to say, oh yeah, I do remember that. I remember you telling me that. And now it turns into, I actually don't remember you telling me that. I remember that happening. They kind of fit in the blank of a confusing memory that you manipulated for them. You know, it's sick and it's twisted, but it happens. And that's exactly what my mother did to my siblings. And during the year that I was living with my Nana, she really made it a point to me to let that part of my family go. It got so bad, it got so toxic, it got so Game of Thrones-ish that she says, you're the only one who made it out. Just leave. Be done with it. But I wanted so desperately to get my siblings out of the house, knowing that the lies that she told destroyed our family, made a man not see his 3 other children anymore because of lies that my mom started. Me not being able to see my siblings because my mom got mad at me that I wouldn't do her bidding, and being virtually unable to have a relationship with them ever again. Sorry again, it's hard to talk about. My Nana did convince me to step away from that part of my family. I was in Las Vegas, so I decided to go to college in Reno, which is a couple hours away, and kind of just put that part of my family behind me and move on and try to better my life. While I was in college, I got to see all these people go home to their families, and I called my mom and I said, listen, I'm willing to forgive everything. I'm willing to let it go. Let me talk to my siblings. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. She said, if you want to talk to your siblings, you can message our family Instagram account where I can monitor everything you're saying. I yelled at her, and as I was yelling, she put me on speaker so all my siblings could hear and said, see, I told you. Listen to him. I heard them in the background for the first time in years, and I broke down. And that was the last time I spoke to my mom. I hung up, and over the years, I've tried to get in contact with my siblings. I tried to get their numbers so I could just try to be a big brother, and I didn't. And from then on out, if you're a fan of the podcast, you know that after the Vegas shooting happened, I reached out to my dad and I asked if he was okay while I was in Reno. And he told me he was getting married, and we reconnected, and he has a He had a little daughter with my now ex-stepmom. He got divorced again. And if you want to hear more about that, you can check out my earlier episode. It's called My Father. Um, but I got reconnected with him, and our relationship is complicated, but he's back in my life, and we're actually going to Disneyland together with his daughter, my sister, and my daughter next week. But you also know that I haven't spoken to my mom, I think, in maybe 11 years. I haven't seen her in that long either, nor my siblings, except just recently. My brother actually reached out to me on Instagram. He was always the one person I felt like if I was ever going to see someone again, it would be him. He reached out to me and said, I've always wanted a big brother. I always wanted to get in contact with you. It was just my mom, you know? I said, look, I know. No one knows better than me. I've tried to get your number for years. So we talk a little bit, very, very, very seldom, very casual. I say, look, man, I don't want to make this weird or anything, but please, can I see you? And he said, okay. We set up a day for me to see him, and he comes over my house. And I almost cried because the last time I saw him, the last memory I have of him is this little toddler guy, this little maybe like 6-year-old guy. And that's my image of him. And now is this grown man with a mustache in my house, this teenager. I couldn't believe it seeing him. I cooked him some pasta and we chatted a little bit, and I was careful what to say. I didn't want to bombard him with, hey, our mom's a liar. I didn't want to say any of that. I just kept it chill, He asked me about our dad one time, and I told him that he loves you very much. And he said, wow, I never knew that. That hurt me too. Because as much as I disagree with my dad sometimes, I'm a father now, so I understand the fact that he didn't even know that our dad loves him. It's crazy, Right around the time that he was about to leave, my mom texts him, ironically, and says, are you at Kendall's house? He said, oh my God, she always knows. She tracked my location. I said, what the fuck, really? He said, yeah, don't worry about it though. I'll take care of it. He leaves. I think maybe we send maybe 5 messages after that throughout the week, and I've never heard from him again. I assume it had something to do with my mother. I spoke to my younger sister one time. Side note, right around the time that I was leaving Reno, leaving college, coming back to Vegas, I was made aware that she was actually attending her freshman year of college at that time in Reno. So we were in the same city, attending the same college, and I had no idea. But I spoke to her one time. Didn't go well. That conversation, I think I'll mostly keep to myself. But it didn't go well. So I have no relationship with my siblings, besides the, I think, 5-year-old that my dad had with my ex-stepmom, who, to be fair, I love, but what do I have in common with a 5-year-old, I think one thing my daughter taught me is something that I didn't even think was possible in our family. Unconditional love. I love my daughter unconditionally. My parents, on the other hand, I feel like all they've ever taught me, all I've ever known is conditional love. Not unconditional, but conditional. And I feel like that spilled over into my relationships. I've always felt like I had to win somebody over with a grand gesture or a prize in order for someone to like me. I've always felt like I had to make someone laugh in order to be liked. I feel like I had to give something in order to get something. I think in my last episode, I spoke about my own self-worth and how I felt like all I was good for is making people laugh and sex. I always felt like I didn't have a really good sense of worth. I felt like I had to give gifts. My love language is gift giving. That's how I felt like I had to live my life. I was so untrusting of people. That's why I speak about again with my baby mama and how I wasn't able to give her everything that she wanted in our relationship because I felt like I had to keep my options open because I was afraid of giving everything to someone and having them hurt me in a way that I never wanted to feel again. My dad, he taught me a lot of horrible things, most importantly, how to treat women. And luckily, gave me the gift of right and wrong, but I'd be lying if I told you I had no chivalry. I thought of everything as a game, and I'm ashamed. I didn't do anything crazy, mind you, but I'm ashamed of a lot of my actions. And I remember looking into my daughter's eyes and just believing, just knowing that things had to be different. And I remember feeling so incredibly in pain that I followed a similar path and I'm co-parents with my baby mama, right? No, speak about this quite often. I feel like a lot of things attributed to that, but I'll admit, I feel like most of it was my fault. Do I blame my parents? It's hard not to. Hey, I'm the captain of my own ship, right? We all are in charge of our own paths. But I think the influence I had from my parents, I think it made a very big impact on me. I think it affected me in a very terrible way. I have trauma, I have anxiety, I have mistrust, I have distrust, I have pain, I have I have an emptiness that I still need to work at with therapy, counseling, and healing. And to any of you who are parents out there, it's important that you hear this and know that even while they're young, they're listening. You think because they're young, oh, it doesn't matter, they'll forget. No, I remember everything. And it hurts me all the time. It's like something will trigger me and I'll get a flashback of a time that I want to forget. Hey, I'm not dwelling on this every day, mind you. I'm for the most part a happy-go-lucky guy, but in my medicine cabinet, there's antidepressants. In my car, there's Xanax just in case I get a panic attack. You know, I still need therapy. I still need to vent. You know, giving you guys an insight to my soul, my journal is sometimes hard because it's even things that I don't want to remember. But sometimes I feel like it's good to get it off your chest. And hey, all I can say is thank you for letting me vent with you. Um, do you guys have any parents that have made you feel this way before? Have you been affected by your parents' behavior in the past? Do your parents know all of the things that you remember from them fighting or things that they put you through? Do you feel like your parenting style has changed because of your parents? Do you want to do things different when you have a kid? Um, let's Let's talk about it. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Hurt people is what I tell my parents. And that emptiness feeling that I told you I felt every once in a while, I felt was just a result of not loving myself. But I will tell you this. The moment I held my little girl in my arms, I saw a reflection of myself and a manifestation of my love. And I knew right then and there that because I loved her, that I was also able to finally love myself too. Guys, I have some really cool things on the pipeline. Number one, it won't be usual that an episode is this long, hopefully, but I have introduced new things on the podcast. One of them being is mailbag. Mailbag is a segment I'll be putting on my show, and basically what it is you send in questions to the single father, me, and you can ask me any questions you want, whether it's parenting, relationship, mental health, or otherwise, or even if it's just commenting on a story or a venting session that I've had. Go ahead and shoot me an email at hello@ventpack.org. And in the subject line, put mailbag, and I'll be reading those questions at the end of my podcast moving forward. Another segment that I've introduced on the show is called venting sessions. If any of you out there who had similar experiences, whether you're a parent, expecting parent, a seasoned parent, or someone who's struggling with mental health, relationships, or if you relate to any of my stories at all in any way, shape, or form, and you want to just get some things off your chest, then you are more than welcome to come vent with me. If you email that email again at hello@ventpack.org and put the subject as venting, I would love to just have you on the show and we can vent together one-on-one. Just describe what you want to talk about and I'll email you back and we will talk about it. If it's appropriate and if it, is a good fit, I'll have you on the podcast. And you can be anonymous, you can use your name, but we'll have a one-on-one venting session together and hopefully it'll be cathartic in some way, shape, or form. So those are the two things that I'm introducing on the show. I've also started a Facebook group called the Single Father Group. Look it up. You can locate more details on that at ventpack.org, where you can see show notes and some recent news and updates that I have for you guys. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Single Father Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. It really does help. The more we grow, the more sponsors we can get, the more quality of episodes we can get, the more guests I can get, the better it will get. Okay, and I want us all to be a pack and support each other, and just thank you for supporting me. Make sure to leave a review and tell me what you guys thought of the podcast too. Guys, as we vent together and have each other's back, thank you for being a part of my pack. I'm the Single Father. Until next time, let's vent together again. Bye-bye.